Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the Long Distance Love Bombs podcast. My guest today is Shana James. Shana is a men's coach who has a couple decades of experience. She has a master's in psychology. She has started businesses. She has facilitated workshops. She's basically worked with thousands of people through the years, all about relationship stuff. And in this conversation, we dive deep into how people can support those that they care about in opening up, in sharing their feelings, in expressing their emotions, holding space. And it's a rambling rampage down a rabbit hole of all kinds of interesting topics. We talk about conflict. We talk about riding the dragon. We talk about robbing a bank. It's good, and she's got a lot of really practical tips that you can use in any relationship to help to create the love that you really desire and to fully express yourself. It's a good conversation. I think you'll dig it. I've put all the relevant links in the show notes if you want to check Shana out. She's got a couple of programs there, free guides and things. Okay, without further ado, Shana James. This episode is brought to you by Cured Nutrition. Cured is the leader in CBD supplementation with an entire line of products designed to take your everyday life to its ultimate potential. Their daily staples are formulated with an in-house clinical herbalist, which has taken the traditional CBD regimen to an entirely new level of optimization. If you're anything like me, you like waking up feeling good and living well. You've probably toyed around with the idea of finding healthy alternatives to jumpstart your morning. Personally, it's why I start my day with Cured Rise, which is their focus supplement. It's a powerhouse blend of functional mushrooms like lion's mane and cordyceps, broad spectrum CBD, and powerful adaptogens. It gives me clean, clear, and sustained energy without any of the caffeine jitters or crash that I get with coffee. After I get going, Aura is next. It's another blend of functional mushrooms, CBD, and adaptogens, but it's got a twist. We all know how important it is to sustain our immunity nowadays, and this covers all of my bases. The vitamin D, prebiotics, crucial antioxidants are delivered straight to the gut, which is the foundation of our emotional and physical health. Am I right? Second brain. It's where the majority of our serotonin production and immune function begin, or it keeps everything in check, performing at its best, so I have one less thing to worry about, and I obviously cannot forget Zen. I use it every night. It is certainly why it has become Cure's #1 selling relaxation and sleep product. You know the long nights spent tossing and turning? Yeah, not with this stuff. It has ingredients like reishi mushroom, ashwagandha, magnesium, passion flower, broad spectrum CBD, so thankfully, restlessness is something of the past. Cured Nutrition products are your answer for a daily dose of health. Visit curednutrition.com. That's C-U-R-E-D nutrition.com. Be sure to use the coupon code LOVEBOMBS, and at the checkout you will save 10% off your order. Shana James, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Actually,
happy to be here.
Did I already screw that up? Is it Shana?
No, you got it right, which is very rare.
I nailed it. So for those who are listening right now who are like, Shana James
Who the hell is she?
Doesn't ring a bell. Do you mind giving a brief intro and like, what's your deal? What are you passionate about?
Yeah, well, I would say I am passionate about connection and authenticity and truth and what's real. And I find that I grew up in a home where there wasn't a ton of that. I mean, there was a lot of truth in the layer of anger and frustration and people venting at each other, but there wasn't a lot of truth in the deeper vulnerability and like, how do we actually love each other in a, artful, masterful way? And so I really became interested in relationships and especially between men and women and how men and women can understand each other and get along and, love each other and have the independence they want and also grow. And I really thought that I was going to work with women for most of my life. And I spent probably a decade, creating workshops and facilitating women through a workshop called the Authentic Woman Experience around how to be empowered and how to be in a loving relationship without trying to be who you think someone wants you to be, how to be authentic. And I started working with men at that same time. And as the more I interacted with men, the more I felt like, oh, there's this calling here. There's a way of relating with men where I can use all the tools in my tool belt, and we can go deep and I can give them feedback that's really honest, but also really loving and help them see how they impact women. So I feel like in some ways I'm still working with women through working with men, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So are you predominantly a male therapist, or sorry, you are a
Relationship
therapist,
coach. I'm a
relationship coach
relationship coach. Yeah.
that works just with men?
I don't work just with men, but I work, a lot with men these
Yeah.
days. And I have some women also who really are trying to understand either why their relationships with men aren't working, why they're not satisfied, the pain of it, whether they're single or in relationship, something's not working.
And so, with your vast knowledge and experience, like, what's the deal with men? Like, why are we so complex or challenging or mesmerizing?
Complex, challenging, and mesmerizing. I love it. Well, I mean, as you said in your talk, right? Men are raised with a whole bunch of a shitty box to live inside of. Like, I have to be strong and grow a beard and be manly, and I can't cry and I can't do all these things. And so, when that's the background and that's the kind of training, then you enter into a relationship. Let's say you're, heterosexual, you enter into a relationship with a woman. How else are you going to be if nobody's, taught that? So, and it demands a whole nother set of heart skills and communication skills and vulnerability that I think a lot of men just aren't taught from a young age.
I can definitely confirm that. And in my own experience dating women and having relationships, I found that I was very frustrated because I didn't know what to do. I kept having the same conversations over and over again.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, I still do that. I'm not like the perfect dude, but
nobody is, though.
Yeah. So I guess where I was going with that is I know that there's a lot of women listening to this podcast that follows my work. Where do you suggest that women start to support a man in opening up?
Yeah.
I hear from a lot of women that they're tired of feeling like they're nagging their partner or criticizing or always being that person.
Well, that never works, right? Because as soon as you start to nag or criticize, in my experience, and you can tell me if this feels true for you, but from what I see, men get more defensive and, don't feel safe to open up and show the vulnerable parts, right? It's kind of, if you're a woman listening, you can imagine this from your side too, or any human, right? If you start to get criticized or made wrong, you're not going to be as likely to be like, here, let me show you my underbelly. Let me, like a dog would roll over and be like, pet my belly. You're like, no, I'm going to protect that part of me because I don't know if you're going to accept that or if you're just going to, bash me again. So where I really start with women, I talk about the difference between inspiring a man, into his best self versus cutting a man down and thinking, oh, if I, tell him why he's wrong or why he did this in a way that I don't like, then somehow he's going to actually just miraculously want to do better, as opposed to want to leave or crawl into a hole and be like, God, why is she being so hard on me?
Yeah, that. And I think, too, I do want to caveat that we are speaking very like heteronormatively in terms of gender.
Totally speaking heteronormatively. Yep.
And I think that a lot of this content, and correct me if I'm wrong, but will relate to anybody who is not comfortable expressing emotion, being vulnerable.
I think so.
Sharing their heart and soul with the world.
Right. If you're a woman listening and you're in relationships with women or people of any gender or men with men, we all have these, you could call them feminine and masculine sides. And so you could listen to it in that way too. And then there's just, I think, the common decency or respect. Like I really learned how little respect there was in my household growing up for each other. And, when you start to respect someone and really try to imagine what it's like to be that person, right? To kind of stand in their shoes for a moment or a day or whatever it is, you start to actually feel the impact of how you're being on that person or how you're treating that person.
Mm. So you've mentioned your own childhood or past a few times. Was there a moment of reckoning in which you kind of decided to go into psychology or
Yeah, it's
coaching,
a good
or
question.
how did that jump happen in which you like grew up in an environment with little respect, lots of fighting, and now
Yeah.
you are coaching couples or I don't know if you do coach couples, but
Yeah, sometimes I do coach couples too. I think it was a gradual transition because I actually went to college for photojournalism, but I had a psychology minor. And then I realized that I was trying to help people see the world through different eyes. Like I was trying to show them images of what I wanted them to see, but I also realized that wasn't the way that I wanted to do it. That I actually wanted to get in there with people's hearts and souls and help people see the world through their own eyes in a different way.
mm,
So, I was already doing my master's in psychology when I was invited to participate in a course as a team, part of a team of women to give men loving and honest feedback. It was called the Authentic Man Program. And it just, it kind of splayed me in a way. Like it broke my heart as I started, hearing men's stories and seeing behind the facade of like, I'm cool, I got it together, I'm all good, and really seeing how much pain, can be inside of any human. And I'd had all these ideas about men, just wanted to use me and really starting to see that we're all so human. Yeah. And it does go back to watching my dad also be the one who was more the passive one in the dynamic where my mom was much more angry and aggressive, and really seeing like, wow, that nobody wins because neither one of them are happy.
it sounds like you got a little bit of a glimpse behind the veil, so to speak, or like pulled the
Yeah.
curtain back. It's like, oh
Yeah.
shit, there's a whole other side to men that
Yeah.
isn't talked about, isn't addressed, especially this would have been 10, 15 years ago,
20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Getting old.
Halfway through that sentence, I'm like, oh God, I'm talking about a woman's age right now. Don't screw this up. Yeah.
It's all right.
So what are some of the surprising things that you've learned over the years about men, or misconceptions that we need to shatter publicly?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest was just how much the men I met cared. Even I remember the day where a couple years into this workshop, the guys who led it were like, we're going to have some of these pickup dudes from the pickup community, which if you don't know about that, it's like, men teaching men how to pick up women and giving them lines and, games and all kinds of things. And I was just like, oh, no, I can't do this. This is going to be horrible. And then when I sat across from them and met them, I was just like, oh, these are men, human beings who, their options were either therapy or pickup at that point, right? There wasn't a lot of self growth for men and coaching for men and stuff like that. And I just really got their humanity, right? That was one of the things that I really ended up feeling is the shared humanity of all of us. And that when we treat someone as though they're doing their best and we aren't so disgusted, as women by awkwardness, or we're not treating men as all men are, like you, the man in front of me, has to make up for what all men have done to me, then we can actually start to relate. And I've seen men change, even like in the moment from being treated by one woman a certain way and then suddenly being, having a woman be kind to him or loving or affirming. And suddenly he becomes a really different person, So really getting that we are impacting the people we're relating with, even when we don't even realize it.
Yeah, one of the things that I've shared previously is just the idea that your partner, your boyfriend, your husband, like really wants to make you proud.
Yeah.
I think
Wants to
as
make you happy,
yeah, like
even if it doesn't seem like it.
yeah, even if he's like, oh no, it's no big deal and doesn't have feelings and emotions, like deep down, I think there's this core. And I'm speaking for a sweeping generalization of an
Yes.
entire species.
Yeah.
So
So
beware.
right, we can say find, pick
Yeah.
out your own uniqueness in the midst of this.
Yes. However, in my experience of working with men, being a man, talking to friends, like we want to be the best boyfriend. We want to be great in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We want you to look at us like you're in love with us. We
Yeah.
want to do well. We want to be good.
Yeah.
And there's that really deep desire and a longing in a way for that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of men in particular are in relationships or they're living a life in which they really don't fully grasp what is required to make that happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're
Mm-hmm.
doing their best and they're at their wits end. And so I just try to communicate that. It's like one of the most profound
Yeah.
sentences you could say to a dude is like, I'm really proud of you as a
Yeah.
partner. It's like,
Right.
oh
The appreciation and that sense of, oh my God, thank you. I see what you're doing for me. I see how you're trying.
yeah.
And, if things aren't going the way you want them to, right, that instead of attacking or bringing the complaint, you
Mm-hmm.
can be vulnerable and bring the desire, right? On the opposite
Oh,
side of the coin of complaint is a desire. We don't want something one way, we want it another way. And so to vulnerably, I think for myself as a woman, I will say that it's been hard for me to ask for what I want. I will more likely walk away and just be like, I'll just start over with someone else because this isn't going to happen anyway. And if it's not happening now, I don't want to have to ask for it, and it feels fucking terrifying
and so when
to
you say
say,
walk away, you mean like leave a relationship?
oh, yes. In
You're just
my
like,
history, I mean, I was married I was in a relationship for 10 years. So it's not like I've left every relationship, but I often have that, like, well, maybe it's just time to go, instead of actually being vulnerable. I remember one of my partners was like, you just skipped like 3 or 4 steps. How about we talk about how, what you're wanting right now and what you're feeling scared of rather than you thinking that this relationship should be over. And I was like, oh yeah, that would go better. But that also feels really scary.
yeah. That for me has been a big learning experience of leaning into that desire to run away into the
Yeah.
woods, literally, rather
Yeah.
than stay and sit and look at a person in the eyes and like
Yes.
feel things.
And feel, right. And feel that the disappointment. I think it's Terry Real who talks about the little disappointments or the everyday disappointments or whatever, right? Like we are always going to be disappointed in some ways by our partners, by our friends, by ourselves. Um, and to be able to communicate that and be honest about it without shaming or blaming or attacking starts to create that kind of respect, and that sense of, oh, I've always wanted to write a book about like being on the same team, a same team relationship instead of, oh, well, if you get your needs met, I won't get mine met. How about we both try to work together to find ways that we can, really get both of our needs met.
Mm. I've heard it described as like your partner being your getaway driver,
Huh.
or you're like your accomplice, right? It's like a different kind of team, but it has a little bit of flair, because you just committed a crime together. Is that what you mean?
That wasn't where I was going with that, but I did see a really funny movie where that happened, and this one couple was committing crimes together, and
Yeah.
they had she'd just broken up with him, and by the end of committing all these crimes, they were in love again.
Oh,
That was really sweet.
it's that. It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. Instead of robbing a bank, it's like doing the dishes or putting the kid in a bath,
Totally.
right?
I mean, I have a sense that women, again, this is a generalization, so check in and see if you're listening, if this is true for you, but I have a sense that a lot of us are scared that if we see the softer side of a man, we will no longer have that rock or that protector or that, the one who we've counted on to be our strength in a certain way. And it's not true, right? Like I would imagine you could speak to this, that you can have really vulnerable feelings and be sad and scared and all these things. And you can also know that you're a strong, powerful, loyal human being, right?
Yeah, exactly that. And I think one way that I describe that is that sharing weakness is a sign of strength.
I love that.
Is
Yeah.
like we need to reframe this idea around what it
Yes.
means to be strong versus what it means to be hard.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like
Yes.
hard, tough men, but they're not necessarily
Strong.
holistically, I would say. Like, yeah, they could probably kick my head in or win a battle in a ring or,
Yeah.
run a business. But if you got them in front of three people, could they say what scares them or what really, makes them tick
Yeah.
inside, what they really want? So I think what you're talking about is trying to accept and appreciate and kind of bring forward the entirety of
Yeah.
of a partner,
Yep.
and recognizing that that is actually true strength and wholeness. And
Right. And that we're not actually any of these things, right? We're not, if someone's acting like a scared little boy or a scared little girl, like when we start to recognize that, oh, well, that's not who he is and that's not who she is. And right, then we can actually call out more of somebody's strength or joy or freedom or connection or whatever versus these ways that we are stuck from our childhood.
Do you have any tricks or any like go-to sentences or mantras in your brain that help you to create that vibe, to like remember to
Yeah.
see the real person and not judge them or react?
Yes. There's a couple. Well, one I talked about shared humanity. So sometimes when I am looking at my partner, I do have this remembering of like, okay, what was he like when he was a little boy? And, or sometimes this works better even with a stranger where it's like, I think he's all tough and he's got it together. And then I'm like, okay, he was a little boy. He wore diapers. He peed in his pants. He's going to die. He's going to lose the functioning of his body. Right. It's like, there's something about remembering that and remembering that everybody is struggling. I mean, you said it yourself in your talk, like life is hard. And what if we imagine that someone was having the worst day of their life? And what if we, assume the best? It's another one that Brene Brown speaks to that I just love, assuming the best about someone. So I'm mixing all the pieces in here, but, right. Kind of just the slowing down and actually remembering that all of these fears or judgments that I have about the ways that my partner might not meet me or the way he might act in one moment aren't who he really is. And if I really want something different, right, that I actually need to bring the vulnerability to ask for it. And then on the other end, I have a practice that I call riding the dragon. And it always makes me laugh because it's something that happened one day when after I got divorced, I committed to not exploding anymore and not just, emotionally vomiting. And so I noticed one day that I, started to have this fire that was coming up at me. And I felt like it was going to be like a dragon and I was going to just, smolder someone's head. And so I don't know why this happened, but I started to imagine myself riding a dragon, like up my chest and pulling back the reins, right? And just being like, whoa, girl, okay, take a breath and cool down. I was in a conversation years ago with a man I was dating, and I think my kid was 2 or 3 at that time. And he was like, well, if we lived together, I wouldn't be available for that morning time because that's the time where I write and I meditate and I, do my exercise. And while I fully understood that and supported that, I also felt like intense rage because I'm like, that's one of the fucking hardest parts of being a parent is that time. And so I just said to him, I did my practice. I imagined pulling the dragon back and I just closed my eyes and I was like, I'm just going to not say anything for a minute until I can say something that's going to be respectful and that will forward this conversation in a way that's loving, And I just closed my eyes and I sat back and I gave myself a moment. And then I came out and was like, okay, I can totally see both sides. And actually, I just feel really, I feel really hurt. And it's not that you need to fix that, but I felt sad about that and imagining myself, being alone as in the midst of a relationship.
Mm. And you raise a really powerful point there, which is simply like, you don't have to say something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're having a conversation or an argument or a disagreement, it is totally okay to just bite your tongue and sit there and decide not to talk.
Yeah.
It's occasionally the very best decision.
Yeah. And that you can always come back. The Gottmans talk about being flooded and how nothing really happens when we're in our kind of primal brain. Like nothing good actually comes of it. And so, waiting for a moment or a time or taking a break somehow to get to a point where you can actually be connected and logical and loving again.
Yeah. I've heard it described as putting your top back on, like blowing your top, of like you've lost your rational mammalian brain is gone. Yeah. Yeah. So we need to just settle and let it come back.
Let it come back.
So that you're not reacting like a crazy dragon lady.
Totally. Now, on the other hand, I think there are many women and probably men too who don't speak up for themselves. And so if you are going to do a practice where you're going to take a breath or not say anything or just simply say, ouch, if something hurts instead of attacking back, right? Which many of my clients have started to practice that, like, oh, if I don't attack back, somehow the whole thing just falls apart, right? Because there's no tension anymore. But then I would recommend, getting clear, whether it's you write it down or you talk to a friend. What is it that you are really wanting? What is it that really, either hurt you or upset you? So don't just stuff it and never talk about it again, because that just creates a dynamic of pain and resentment.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Is when I was saying you don't have to talk, I meant like in that moment.
Right.
Not
ever.
Put this down into your soul so that it slowly erodes your life.
Yeah.
And causes pain and disease and suffering.
Yeah, you don't want that.
Okay, so to wrap that kind of topic up in terms of how women can, or how a human can hold space and help another human to open up.
Yeah.
What would be the like main things as takeaway?
Yeah. I mean, I think the main thing would be to welcome whatever's there, right? Like, it's okay if you're scared. It's okay if you're mad. It's okay if you're hurt. It's okay if you're, if you're disappointed, like whatever it is, can we welcome that from another person? Listen fully, right? No, I'm not saying you should sit in the face of someone attacking you or blaming or shaming you, but if someone's actually being vulnerable or awkward, can we let them finish and then come, respond from a place of care and love, right? And usually what works best is first saying like, okay, am I getting you right? What I heard you say was this, or what it seems like is this. Is that right? And then, right, giving yourself that time, like you said, to sit with it. Maybe you want to go away and think about it for a day or a couple hours, or maybe you're ready to come up with something. And again, thinking about being on the same team, right? Okay, if we're on the same baseball team, I'm not going to try to, hit a ball way past you or drive it so hard that you have to like skin your face while you're going to try to get it, right? How can you actually create something together?
Or like that movie Ocean's 11 where they're robbing Vegas. And I think it was George Clooney or Brad Pitt or one of those handsome men.
Yes.
It's like, you wouldn't criticize the person on your team at the expense of the entire team. You wouldn't be like, hey, you idiot, don't do it like that. You would say, excuse me, sir, we need to make sure that alarm is not functioning when we enter the property. So, let's really try to keep our heads about us, mates. Right.
And that way their attention is on the thing that needs to be accomplished versus feeling shitty about themselves and going into like a shame spiral that then has them disconnect and unable to actually, be with you in the way that you want to be.
Yeah. That
was a great example.
Yeah. I thought for sure we would talk about Ocean's 11 and riding dragons today. I have it on my Shana James podcast bingo card.
That would be fun.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about was you reference a crisis in men and women in your TED Talk.
Yeah.
What is the
What is
crisis?
the crisis? I
Just
mean,
in
the
case
crisis to me
in case I'm
is
not clear.
that there's so much misunderstanding, and that
Mm,
people can be, and this, again, this doesn't have to be just heterosexual relationships, but I tend to work a lot with men and women. And so people can be in a relationship with someone and feel more alone than they felt when they were by themselves, you know?
mm,
Yeah. And I think the crisis is everybody wanting from each other, but not actually knowing how to communicate or how to get that from each other.
mm.
And so this just ultimate breakdown of people not really seeing each other for who they are, and not learning how to keep love and passion alive. And, ultimately everyone just kind of feeling fried and dead inside and wondering, why the hell are we doing this anyway?
So feeling fried and dead inside, not ideal,
Yeah,
right? Is part of the cause of that crisis individually not knowing what we actually want or need?
I think so. Yeah.
And so we
I
kind
think,
of look to our partner to fill that wound or tend that wound.
yeah,
Um, but we don't know what we're looking for, so we're not sure when we have it or don't have it. Does that make sense?
I think it's true. I think, a lot of the work I do with people when they first come to me is figuring out, well, what do you actually want? Right. And setting aside the expectations and the shoulds and this is too dirty, or this is too, soft, or this is too whatever it is. And actually, like, well, yeah, but what would make you happy? Right. What would be meaningful for you? And we are conditioned a lot by our families that there's a certain way and there's a right way. And if you go against that way, you're not going to be part of our tribe. You're not going to be loved. And right. And so undoing that. And then there's a lot of, okay, now that I know what I want, how do I actually get it to come out of my mouth? Right.
What do you say to people who say to you, I don't know what I want? And you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, you do. Like, what do you want? Like, what do you want in a relationship? I don't know.
I don't know.
I just have no
Well,
idea.
yeah, usually I slow it down. And often, if someone really doesn't know what they want, I'll start with what they don't want, because that, again, that's a clue, right? It's like the complaint and the desire are just opposite sides of the same coin. So if we know what we don't want, we are starting to get access to what we do.
Hmm.
And then I have people just start to walk around and, look around at people and how they are acting or how they're treating each other, or what they're doing, starting to imagine, how do you want to spend your time? Right? What do you want to be doing? What do you love to be doing?
Hmm.
Um, and starting to get that sense of, okay, if I could do this with another person, if it was possible, right? Let's just say it might be possible,
Yeah.
then what would it be?
And practicing that imagination component or the
Mm-hmm.
curiosity component.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both curiosity, imagination. And then, right. So I get to, when I'm in the middle of a session with someone, they'll say something and I kind of look at them and be like, okay, well, that looks totally flat over there. Nothing, so you're saying it, but I'm not feeling it. So, okay, try again. We just kind of keep going through it. And that was suddenly, I'm like, oh, did you feel that spark? You just lit up and you got excited. And,
Mm.
I remember a moment for myself when I was feeling depleted, or I think I was at the end of a relationship, at the end of a breakup or something. And someone said, what do you want? And the first thing that came to mind was flowers. I was like, I just want to see flower. Like, it didn't have anything to do with ultimate, really like deep relationship needs. But I think if we can start following those little moments too, like you walk into a coffee shop, or these days you walk outside of a coffee shop and you look and you're like, what would really taste good? Like, what do I want right now? Or in the grocery store, starting to allow your body also to communicate. Like, I notice, if I go toward a certain fruit and my body isn't really down with that, or it doesn't, like, it's not the right time, I can actually feel it in my body. I can start to feel acidic, or I can start to feel heavy. And so starting to bring in more of your senses rather than just your mind, right? Because with your mind, it's like, oh, I'm going looking for something. I'm trying I'm trying. There's like a forcing or a pressure, versus when you just get quiet and let things arise, from your body, from your heart. There's a different way of listening.
Go on. How do you
How do you do that?
practice that or cultivate that skill set?
Yeah. And I think, meditation is a great way. Yoga is a great way to really just come back to the moment and give yourself some time, right? If someone says, what do you want? What do you want for dinner? Instead of thinking like, oh shit, I've got to have the answer right now. And if I don't have the answer right now, I'm going to, look stupid. And, might just be taking a breath and being like, let me check. And then kind of, going inside, closing your eyes or leaving them open or whatever, and just feeling into different options. Like, okay, when I imagine this one, does my energy go up or does my energy go down? Do I get like tingles in my body or do I get this heavy, flat sense of, dread?
Yeah. I'm smiling because in my relationship with my partner, she's really good at that. That woman just is tapped into her heart and
Yeah.
her intuitive
That's so
GPS
great.
system like nothing. And I am not. I'm getting better, but I'm smiling because just this morning she's like, "I'm making tea. Do you want some tea?" And I
You're
was like,
uh,
yeah, I do."
yeah.
And then she's sitting there like, "What kind of tea?" Like, um, I want peppermint. I want
Yeah.
peppermint tea. She's like, "We don't have peppermint tea." I'm like, "Oh,
Oh, damn.
I want." It's like it's a process because I'm literally
Yeah.
just going through the inventory. Like,
Well, and some of
yeah,
us are slower and some of us are faster, and depends
yeah,
on the situation. But what I would say is just making that right. Like, even if
yeah,
it seems awkward or, oh God, I'm the slow one and they always know faster, like just make that right. That's
yeah,
okay.
yeah, and figuring out a compromise. And so oftentimes what will happen is she'll say, "The water's on the stove." Like I've made the water.
Totally. If
Like
you want it,
I offered,
grab
like
it.
I'm gonna go sit down. I'm not gonna wait for you. She's not
Yeah.
saying all of that. She's just saying,
The water's on the stove.
"Water's on the stove. Help
I
yourself."
like that.
Like you know where the tea is. You're a big
Yeah.
boy.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's many instances of that, and I
Right.
think
Well, and some women are like, I can't believe you don't know. Why don't you know? This is
yeah,
annoying, right?
yeah,
Recognize like your own annoyance is usually your own annoyance,
yeah,
and
yeah. And she's dealt with that because again, like you're like, "Hey, do you want tea?" She's like, "Yeah, green tea." Oh, okay, because she
she just
knows,
knows.
and I can see from her perspective how it could potentially be frustrating to
Yeah.
deal with somebody that takes 8 seconds to answer a very simple question,
Simple question.
right?
And then though, if you get to the other side, you're like, okay, 8 seconds. Like we're so hard on each other and we're moving so fast these days.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we take care of ourselves in the midst if someone else isn't giving us what we need or want in that moment?
Mm.
It's kind of like, how do you soothe yourself instead of having to blow up or feel that irritation or, again, assuming the best about someone?
Yeah, it relates to that riding the dragon thing, right? So maybe you can just expand on that. So you identify that there's a dragon living inside your chest that's starting to come out and spit fireballs at a
Yes.
person
Yeah.
for that might be regretful or perhaps
Yeah.
not the right decision. So how do you soothe that dragon? Are there steps or tips or tricks?
Yeah. I mean, I think first it's like, again, making myself right. So in that situation where the guy was like, I wouldn't be available in the mornings, the first part was actually acknowledging, as much as I didn't want it to be that way, I really wanted him to be there. Right. If we were going to do that, I really didn't want to be alone in those moments. And so having compassion for myself and just making my need or desire right, I think is the first step. Right. And then communicating. One of my friends years ago was talking about the race to vulnerability in her relationship. She was like, whoever gets to vulnerability first wins. And so that's guided me too, where it's like, oh, I could say, you know what, I hate the idea of you doing that, even though I really like you doing your practices because I know it's good for you, but that feels shitty to me because I'm going to be alone. I was like, more like, okay, what feels really vulnerable is I feel sad and I want you to do the things you want to do, but I also am not sure how to navigate this conflict because there's something I really want here, and I feel really disappointed by that, you know?
Yeah, so that first part, the idea is that it's okay to want the thing that you
Whatever you want.
want,
Yeah.
right? And it's okay to, and then the second part is it's okay to feel however it
Whatever
is
you
you're
feel.
feeling, right? It's like, I think those are two really powerful lessons that if all of humanity could embody
Seriously.
at a
Yeah.
bone deep level,
Yeah.
it's like,
And it's okay that whoever's in front of you wants what they want and
yeah.
feels what they feel.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that doesn't mean that we need to quickly disappear someone's desire to make it work, or disappear someone's feeling, right? That we can stay in that kind of, who's the one who calls it the messy middle? I can't remember who it is.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah.
But that can feel like the uncomfortable place to be
Totally.
for both of us, right?
Totally. And on the other side of it, I promise, right? There's a deeper understanding that comes of yourself and the other. There's respect that happens. There's new ideas. There's new creativity and possibility, right? And, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a right fit with someone. Sometimes there's the realization of, oh, we love each other, but this doesn't work. The pacing, my ex, who I was married to, he was very slow paced, and I am a little more of a bunny, a quick pace, And there were ways that we worked on it. Like, I remember when we were packing to go to Burning Man years ago, and I knew that it was going to take him like 6 hours, and I would do my part in 1 or 2, and that I would be waiting around, just like, so I was like, oh, let's divide things up. You do that, I'll do this. And then I got to go sit and read or take a walk or do whatever I wanted to do, And ultimately, those things can be worked with when they're, smaller things like that. When it becomes a bigger partnered issue, like, around how fast you want a relationship to go, or that I think, one of the reasons our relationship ended was we had a kid, and he really wanted to spend a lot more time on his own thing than being in a family. Right. And so when it becomes a much bigger dynamic like that, I think there's a question of, is this relationship going to work? But for the smaller ones, I would say, right, if you can do your best to talk them through and actually get the other person's world, like, where are you coming from and what matters to you and why is this important to you? Right? Be willing to hear all those things, even if it feels like scraping on a chalkboard to you because it's so different from how you think. Mm-hmm. And if you can't do that, then I think it's time to, get help from a therapist or a coach or a friend or someone who can be there with you.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing that, if you've listened to my podcast a lot, you've heard me harp on about, but this idea that we need to normalize therapy, that going to couples therapy is actually a good sign.
Healthy. Yeah.
It's a healthy sign. It means you care.
Yep.
It means that you're invested. It's not too late.
None of us were given the tools for this.
No.
Unfortunately.
Gosh, wouldn't it be nice if we were, though?
Oh my God. I dream of a world, and actually I'm seeing it now, having a young child.
Yeah.
I'm seeing more of the emotional education and the collaborative education that they got in preschool and, even now in elementary school, that it is starting to happen more. There's more emotional awareness for sure.
How old is your kid?
Just turned 9.
Oh yeah. My sister has a 2-year-old, and she said at the preschool, like, I was at her house and the kid starts, being a kid, and my sister's like, hey, like, let's find our breath. Remember what teacher Dottie says or whatever. Yeah. And this little 2-year-old kid stands there and goes, and like takes a real big inhale and a real slow exhale. And I was like, oh my gosh, I learned that when I was like 34.
Yeah.
And I'm still working on it. And
yes.
Yeah. I think it's important to realize that the youngsters are coming through with an entire suite of tools that we're still learning. Yeah. It's not just that they're learning computer programming in 3rd grade and all this, building apps.
They are, but they're also learning, these inner tools.
Yeah. What is there something that we haven't touched on that you're like, bro, everybody needs to know this? Why haven't you asked me this question?
That's a good question.
Anything that you hear all the time that you just want want the world to know, or something that is really grinding your gears lately?
Yeah, something. I mean, I think just from, spending time with hundreds, thousands, however, I don't even know how many at this point, but men who have been vulnerable with me and cried with me and shown the fear and the despair and, um, the anger, the frustration, the loneliness, all of that. It's like, if you're not getting that, if you're a woman listening and you're not getting that from a man, it's not that it's not there. He may not actually have access to it. Or I'm working with a woman actually right now who her partner just seems really content and happy with how life is going. And she wants more of like the depth and the darkness and and so what we also discovered is that she's been hiding that, right? She hasn't brought it forward. And so there is kind of a game of like somebody has to go first, but you can be living in the same house with someone and think you know a person because they haven't brought something, but then you haven't brought something. And, I actually know a couple also who's been together probably for 20 years and they are potentially separating. And I've seen them both individually and together. And together, they haven't been themselves. And individually, I'm like, wow, you too. Like, what game were you playing these, past 20 years where it was too scary to actually bring who you are? So, I would say, I think part of the vulnerability, but also the beauty of being in a relationship is, um, bring who you are and also be willing maybe to let something die, right? Like a relationship can die without you having to separate or divorce or any of that. You could put a phase of a relationship to rest and bring more life and consciousness into a new phase. Or there are times where couples are like, we're really, this isn't right. We didn't create this relationship based on, fundamentals of trust and respect and agreements about how we were going to treat each other and love for each other. So, there's too much pain and history here, and that's okay too.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I've heard it described as like the relationship didn't fail, it finished.
Mm, I
Or
like that.
even a specific aspect of a relationship. You could just decide, like, look, 2020 is ending. What a shit show of a year that's been. And in 2021, let's both commit to
Yeah.
a weekly hour of connection, or,
Right.
radical honesty, or
Yep.
being the first one to be vulnerable, or
I
whatever.
love that. What do we want? What do we want to agree to and write it down?
Mm,
And, if you don't live up to these things, it's not that anyone's wrong and bad and needs to be punished,
yeah.
but there's a joint, sense of this is what we're striving for. This is what we are living by.
Yeah.
And let's try it together.
Yeah, why not? And you don't have to do it forever. You can just
No.
try it for what's a good amount of time? A month, 2 months,
Yeah. I
six
like a
months?
month. I like a time bound experiment, I call it, right?
Yeah.
It's like try it for a short amount of time. And if it goes well, do more of it. And if it doesn't, then see what would have this go well, right? What didn't work. I remember with my ex-husband, there was a way like I wanted to explore more passion and, domination and submission and all that. And I was like, let's try it for a week, and a day in, it just blew up and we were just in a hot mess. And I talked to someone who had a lot more experience and she was like, how about 5 minutes? Like you can try that for 5 minutes or an hour. You don't have to create an experiment where it's a week long. So, you could also just try it once, especially if your partner is less willing. Be like, will you sit down with me and have this one conversation? And then you can go to the next one and go to the next one, right? So
Mhm.
it can work to create a short time bound experiment. And it can also work to just put one thing in the calendar or take one step and then do the next one, at the end of that one.
Yeah. You can go slow, is the point.
Yeah.
You've
It's
got
okay to go
time.
slow.
Shana, where can people find you on the internet? Do you have
Yeah. The best way probably is my website, shanajamescoaching.com. I have a podcast called Man Alive that is for men, but a lot of women do listen and find like, wow, I'm getting a window into the world of, what men are learning. And a lot of women who find it also send it to their men or listen to it with their men. And then on my website at shanajamescoaching.com/TEDx, if you're a man, there's a guide there about igniting women's desire naturally. And if you're a woman, there's a guide about I think it's the 3 simple miscommunications that push men away and how to bring them back.
Cool. And if you're listening, I'll put all that in the show notes. You don't have to remember all that. Just click the links below. You're so delightful.
Oh, thanks.
This is fun. Thanks, Shana. I really appreciate the work you're doing, and it's an interesting path, I think, to find a female therapist who primarily works with men. I haven't spoken with one of those, so it's been interesting.
It's an interesting path, and it's not always easy. There are a lot of men out there who are just like, well, who are you to tell me? And I'm like, I'm not, I promise. My dad is like, well, what advice do you give to men? I'm like, I don't actually, I don't think men need more advice. I think, supportive, loving guidance to understand themselves, right? More than here's how you're supposed to be my way. I want people to find their own way.
Like creating that safe container for us dudes to figure our stuff out and feel safe doing it.
Totally. And thank you for what you're doing, because I love the idea that kindness is cool, and I watch my child having been bullied and just the way that from a young age kids treat each other, which also happens because we pass it down as parents and adults. And so I love the idea of people being more kind and accepting.
So rational to me.
It is. It feels
we just not be kind to each
assholes.
Other. Assholes is a proper way to say it. Right. Can we just not be assholes anymore? Can we all just agree that that's a good idea?
Yeah. I mean, when I really think about it, it's like there's pain or anxiety in ourselves that has us tense or on edge, or, right, that someone else's way would be so annoying or frustrating or painful for us. So then that just really does speak back to okay, do your own work, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of mirrored my own evolution from a business perspective. When I first started, it was about spreading messages and trying to change the world and all that. And now it's much more along the lines of, we got to do the work in the mirror.
Yeah.
And that's how it actually spreads.
Yeah. Yeah. And just for the couple side, one last thing, oftentimes I work with people who even though they're in a couple, they come alone. And as they start to change and they start to do their own work, their partners notice and they shift as well.
Yeah. Somebody's got to go first, right? Your actions are an invitation to the other. Yes, exactly. Hey, this is cool. I found this thing. I'm going to do it this way. My life is better now.
Yep.
Join me. All right. Shana, awesome. Thanks again. I love talking to you. And
that was great.
Yeah. See you soon.
Great. Thank you.
Congratulations! You did it. You finished the episode. Well done. I hope you enjoyed Shana James. I hope you learned some things. I hope you committed to a day or an hour or a minute or a week of a new arrangement or agreement in your life. I've included links to all of the relevant things that she mentioned in the show notes. There's guides, there's a website. I think she's on Instagram. You can check her out. Thank you for your support, for being here, for listening to my voice right now. I appreciate you. I appreciate your shares, your 5-star reviews. Thank you for helping me to spread the word, create a positive impact in the world, make kindness cool and compassion commonplace. Let's heal each other. Let's heal ourselves. Let's look in the mirror and start to make some changes, like Michael Jackson suggested. That's how we do it. Anyway, you're great. Go do some somersaults. I hope you adopt a puppy today and maybe even pet a horse. You're the best, and I will talk to you soon.